It was a night that should have been silent. On the southeastern border of Burkina Faso, just past midnight, the calm was broken by an unfamiliar hum. Out of the darkness, a glow appeared in the sky, unmanned drones circling above like watchful eyes. Within moments, a convoy of vehicles was struck with surgical precision. By dawn, nothing remained but twisted metal and smoke curling into the horizon. The headline spread like wildfire, a drone strike in Burkina Faso. Yet, the deeper story was never just about the blast, it was about the questions it unleashed. Who authorized this operation? Was it an act of sovereign defense, a covert warning, or the first sign that African nations were rewriting the rules of global power? For decades, drone warfare was the monopoly of global superpowers, backed by budgets in the billions. But here, in one of Africa's so-called peripheral states, advanced technology had just been used with precision that forced even Washington, Paris, and London to pay attention. This was not just a strike, it was a message, a declaration that Africa was stepping into a new era where autonomy would be defended not only with words, but with tools once thought exclusive to the West. Was this the opening shot of a new balance of power, or a warning meant to unsettle the old order? The silence was broken swiftly. Within hours, President Ibrahim Traoré's office confirmed the truth. Yes, the order had come from the highest level. This was no rogue mission, no accident. It was a calculated demonstration of capability. For the first time in Burkina Faso's history, the world had to reckon with an African leader openly taking responsibility for a drone strike. And the drone itself was no ordinary machine. Intelligence identified it as a North Korean prototype, retrofitted with Russian navigation and linked to the AES, the new African Joint Security Network connecting Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. This was not just hardware, it was proof of a rising multipolar alliance. Africa, long treated as the testing ground for others' technologies, had suddenly become the innovator. But the intrigue deepened at the crash site. Investigators found fragments of American rifles, encrypted radios with French serial codes, and maps of resource corridors printed in English. Even more startling, military ID tags tied to Nigerian operatives. The financial trail added more layers, with shell companies in London, Paris, and Abu Dhabi moving tens of millions of dollars in recent months. Among the recovered documents, two code names surfaced repeatedly: Falcon Hand and DC Handler. No one knew exactly what they meant, but whispers in diplomatic circles pointed to covert networks operating well beyond Africa's borders. For the Burkinabe public, the revelations struck with double force. On one hand, Traoré's decisive strike was hailed as proof that their nation would no longer bow to foreign meddling. On the other, it confirmed their worst fears that mercenaries, multinational interests, and hidden powers were conspiring against their sovereignty. Western capitals saw it differently. Some called it reckless, others a masterstroke of deterrence. Energy investors warned that if such strikes escalated, billions of dollars in Sahelian contracts could be at risk. Was this a one-time show of strength, or the first chapter in a new era of African military autonomy? The story only sharpened as more intelligence surfaced. In a secure chamber in Ouagadougou, the AES Council convened urgently. Phones confiscated, cameras banned. One phrase leaked from that meeting, a phrase that ricocheted around the world: "If they send ghosts, we send thunder." It was Traoré's warning to those who believed Africa would remain vulnerable to mercenaries and sabotage. The urgency was not rhetorical. Intelligence units had intercepted and encrypted communication. Its codename, Operation Broken Spine. Its target, Burkina Faso's Kudu Oil Refinery, a $1.3 billion facility and symbol of Sahelian independence. The refinery was more than steel and pipelines. It was a declaration that Africa could refine its own resources, set its own prices, and break free from exploitative imports. The intercepted files revealed convoys assembling near the border, explosives loaded, coordinates aligned with the refinery's location. The strike window was precise, calculated to cripple Kudu before its full launch. Faced with the threat, the AES debated fiercely. Some feared escalation. But Traoré was resolute. Kudu, he said, was the spine of a nation learning to stand upright. Allowing it to be broken would condemn them to permanent dependency. The decision was swift: neutralize the threat. And so the midnight strike was carried out not against traitors, not against civilians, but against armed convoys preparing sabotage. The cargo was explosives. The mission was clear. Burkina Faso's sovereignty would not be bargained away. But questions lingered. Who funded Operation Broken Spine? The trail led to Western-made weapons, Nigerian operatives, and money cycling through shell companies in global capitals. Who was the shadowy DC handler named in every intercepted file? A foreign intelligence officer? Or the symbol of power centers far beyond Africa? For ordinary citizens, the details mattered less than the symbolism. Once again, Africa had been targeted not because of its weakness, but because of its growing strength. By striking first, Traoré chose sovereignty over silence. And then came another revelation: the weapon itself. The drone was not imported, not borrowed. It was something far more unsettling for Western observers: the NA-7, a platform developed through collaboration between Burkina Faso, North Korea, and Russia. With an 800-kilometer range, AI-guided navigation, and thermal-seeking warheads, it struck with surgical accuracy. In just 12 minutes, the convoy was destroyed. No collateral damage, no traceable misfire. Defense analysts gave it a name: the clean blade of Ouagadougou. For Burkina Faso, the symbolism was immense. In one strike, they had shifted from being a pawn to a player. For the West, the dilemma was undeniable: adapt to a new Africa or try to undermine it before the balance tipped further. The investigation revealed even more troubling details. The mercenaries were not faceless freelancers. They were former Nigerian special forces, men trained in bases funded and supplied by Western partners. Their encrypted communications traced back to servers in Virginia, igniting speculation about intelligence links. Washington denied involvement. But in African streets, the message was clear. Destabilization often came not from faceless outsiders, but from within, through soldiers repurposed after careers built under foreign tutelage. Markets grew jittery. If drone warfare became Africa's new tool for resource defense, billions in foreign contracts could be at stake. Western officials muttered about escalation. But in the streets of Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, the people celebrated. Flags waved. Murals painted drones as symbols of self-defense. Hashtags like #Sahel Rising and #Don't Mess with Sovereignty trended across social media. Traoré's fiery words, "If you send agents in the shadows, don't be surprised when we send fire," became a rallying cry. For decades, African leaders had been cast as muted, dependent. Now, a young captain stood before the world, refusing to bow. From this momentum emerged Operation Iron Shield. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced joint patrols, satellite data sharing, and encrypted command networks. An attack on one would be treated as an attack on all. For the first time, security in the Sahel was no longer subcontracted to foreign missions. It was African-led, African-funded, and rooted in collective sovereignty. Citizens called it Africa's first shield. Murals, music, and poetry spread the message. Sovereignty is defense. Sovereignty is dignity. Western capitals bristled. French media warned of destabilization. U.S. think tanks cautioned of a pivot toward Moscow and Beijing. Markets fretted. But in African streets, hope eclipsed fear. Hope that their children would grow up under governments capable of defending themselves. Hope that sovereignty was more than rhetoric. Hope that dignity could finally be codified into doctrine. And so the new Sahel Doctrine was declared. Any foreign force operating without registration or transparency would be treated as hostile, neutralized, and exposed before the world. No more shadows, no more backdoor bases, no more advisors crossing borders unchecked. This was psychological independence as much as military. Western powers recalculated the costs. French forces discreetly withdrew from outposts. U.S. officials admitted intervention had grown unsustainable. The burden had shifted. The balance had changed. Standing before his people and the cameras, Captain Ibrahim Traoré declared, "Fear is for those who borrow power. We built ours." It was more than rhetoric. It was a boundary drawn not on paper but in collective will. The strike that lasted minutes had unleashed political tremors that would echo for months. The new African Red Line was not about drones or borders alone. It was about mindset. The audacity to say, "We will not be managed. We will not be reduced. We will not be ignored." This is not just a story of drones or even of geopolitics. It is a story of dignity, of a continent long treated as a pawn beginning to speak as a player. The world must now ask, will this red line transform Africa's future or provoke the storm of retaliation from those who fear an Africa unchained? History is unfolding, and whether one sees it as threat or hope depends on where one stands when thunder breaks the silence.